back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I want to do the pig vomit thing, say WNST. Please set a place on your radio dial for us at AM 1570. We're going to be out doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour next week. I'll be giving away these instant lottery scratch-offs, just like Granddad had back in the 70s. It is the 50th anniversary. We had some winners. Fadley's had some winners last week up at Pappas and Bel Air. Hope you're enjoying that. We had some great conversations. Our friends from the Chesapeake Feline Association are going to be adopting beautiful, beautiful cats, well-loved cats. Let me get the logo out here. On May 6th, we'll be doing that up at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. We had Karen out. And by the way, she's from Dundalk, so that's good. Her husband went to school with Gary Iwanowski. What's up, Iggy? If he's listening, so big shout out to him. Iggy's a big Ravens fan as well. One day, he and I will make it to a Morrissey concert or something like that. By the way, Luke, I have the new BS gavel that I'm going to break out, and I just want to say this because I did not promote this properly in the Oriole segment. I am going to be releasing the Peter Principles this week and next week. Be really honest with me. Have you read it all?
Not all of it, but I've read large portions of it.
Well, here's the thing. You were a young lad back in the 96. You were 13 years old. I have gone through the basic batch shittery of 30 years of Oriole ownership. And this is my Raskin Global. I'm figuring out whether I'm going to eat some crabs at Costas and crack some beer. Mr. Costas giving me beer to open with the opener, or whether I'm just going to keep this around and just make it my BS gavel. The Leonard Raskin, boom. So I just need to say this because I'm wearing Leonard's shirt. Get your taxes in today or tomorrow. If you need an extension, get it done. That's why I'm wearing Leonard's shirt today. Give him some love. We're not doing a segment this week, and I'm giving him some love on the crab mallet. But the BS mallet, right? Like, here's the BS mallet. If you had this with Chad Steele last week during the DaCosta, Harbaugh, OBJ thing, you and I did a segment about it. You said that it was polished, right? Well polished, and that's who OBJ is, and he's making videos and Instagrams and all of this stuff. They still have this basic problem of not having a happy quarterback and not having him paid. And I guess the bright, shiny object last week was that. But as it gets closer to the draft and the clock goes on and quarterbacks come off and where they are, this next 10 days, this is when it really gets sticky, where if the Colts or the Falcons really covet Lamar and we don't know it, or the Dolphins, and that's possible, man. It's possible. This would be a time where if somebody else wants Lamar Jackson to be their quarterback, this might not be a bad time to inquire or re-inquire.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I just don't know if there's any smoke to suggest that that's going to happen. I mean, we've had this conversation so many different times, and not just you and me. I mean, it's the talk of the NFL. I mean, it's Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers.
We're getting really close to the meeting point here. Like, once the draft picks come off the board, you kind of are where you are, kind of, sort of, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I guess, some people have said it. Maybe a team would do it after the draft because then you still get to use your first round pick this year. But I still look at it and say you still need so much cap space to be able to pull off a deal of this magnitude. And again, that's assuming you have an offer that Lamar Jackson's interested in, and we assume it's either the full guarantee or at least $230 million fully guaranteed, whatever semantics you want to use with some of the different.
How about just more than the Ravens are willing to give you? How about that?
Well, but is a team doing that? I mean, I just think at some point in time, for me, you just keep coming back to Occam's razor. Like, what's the most simplistic example? The explanation for this is I don't think there's a team that's interested, not because they don't like Lamar Jackson in isolation, but all of the variables that are at play at the same time here. And it adds up to, well, we have an early draft pick and we want to take a swing at a young quarterback, and we can load up the rest of our roster and see how that works. We don't want to sign Lamar to an offer sheet thinking the Ravens are just going to match it, because then all we're doing is wasting our time and, just doing work for Eric DaCosta and Steve Bisciotti and the Ravens. Again, we don't need to rehash every single explanation. I mean, we've kind of talked about that. So I hear you. And look, I'm not saying it's 0%. I just don't think it's the high percentage at this point. I just don't. And again, if a team is truly really lying in the weeds, so to speak, and they jump out and they make that offer, they sign them to that offer sheet, or they call the Ravens and say, "Hey, we'll give you this for Lamar Jackson. Get him to sign the tag and do this, and we'll give him his deal and all that." I feel like as more time goes on, I feel that's less likely this offseason because again, you have to do a lot of rearranging with your salary cap, and teams will do that in late February and early March because that's kind of how the NFL calendar works, right? You have to be compliant with the salary cap by the middle of March when the new league year starts. But you typically don't see that kind of maneuvering this deep into the offseason because teams have signed guys. They've acquired guys. They've already cut guys that they were planning to cut. I mean, even the famous, we've talked about it for years, the post June 1st type deals. Well, you can do that ahead of time now, and you can just designate that after the fact. So I hear you, and I'm not saying that, again, that it's impossible, but I kind of feel for Lamar, it's the Ravens or him potentially holding out and holding out for a long period of time. And look, I'm not saying he's guaranteed to play on the tag at 32.4 million and it's going to be kumbaya and perfect, but
you don't
I
think
feel
he
like
shows up in June? Like, let's cut through this
not
because you and I
June,
are going to
no.
do a lot of football here. Like, right? What is your crystal ball right now? What would be the thing that would loosen here other than the Ravens giving him $200 million, which it doesn't appear they're going to do? So if they're not doing that and he's not going to sign the offer sheet because he has no interest in signing the offer sheet right now, what's the game here?
Well, I mean, he's not going to show up in the spring. He's not contractually obligated. He's not signed, so he doesn't have to. It's not even a holdout. He's unsigned.
Right. He can't
So
get fined in
he
June, right?
wasn't here for
Correct?
OTAs. No,
Correct.
he can't get. He can hold out until the season starts. I mean, he's not under contract. This isn't like last year where it was the 5th-year option and it was a team option and they exercised it and he's under contract. He's not under contract right now. So that's part of it. He skipped OTAs last year. I know Odell Beckham is in the organization now, and I think his presence could play a role as we get into training camp and talking about that. But I'd be surprised if we see Lamar, certainly for OTAs. I don't expect to see him for minicamp. And I don't know that. You asked me my crystal ball prediction at this point. If you're asking me what I think's going to happen, I think he's going to play on the tag. Now, can they rework that deal to maybe add some incentives to get him up to what the exclusive number would have been if he plays a certain number of games, throws a certain number of touchdowns, whatever, to make him a little bit more whole from a single season standpoint? I mean, $32 million is well below market value for Lamar Jackson. Wherever you want to rank him in the quarterback hierarchy, as far as, whether he's the second best, fifth best, 10th best, 12th best, he's underpaid at 32.4
His agent has
relative to
done a
the
poor
market.
job.
So, well, sure. I'm not going to disagree with how he's handled the negotiation to this point, and I feel for him in that way to a point, but it's the choice he's made. So what I think happens is I do think he shows up. I think he signs the tag. Like I said, maybe they rework it to add some incentives, add a few more carrots, so to speak, to make him a little more inclined to show up. I don't know, August 4th compared to August 20th, let's say. And again, I'm just throwing out numbers, but I'm kind of gauging this off of franchise players in the past for, where it was either contentious or a very strong deadlock, right? This impasse that where they've been for a long time now. But I do think it's training camp. I do think, and we've talked about this, he has plenty of incentive to want to have a really strong season himself. Look,
when does he
we
meet
can sit
Todd
here.
Monken and get a playbook, dude?
Well, there are ways to get him a playbook. I'm sure that I would be surprised if that hasn't happened.
Dude, what kind of holdout are you holding out if you're studying? You know what I mean?
Well, but at the same time, he's making a business decision, and lots of guys, Ravens players have held out in the past. Draft picks used to hold out all the time. I'm not saying it's going to make them better this season.
You know what my daddy would say? Same thing your daddy would say. It's not making you a better ball player, Luke.
It's not, but at the same time, he's got to exercise leverage that he feels he should exercise. Which, by the way, I still think, and you and I talked about this last year, if he really wanted a fully guaranteed deal, to me, last training camp was the time to hold out or hold in, which has kind of been the in vogue thing to do now, where you can avoid a fine because you're technically there, but you're not taking part in practice. And we've seen players do that. We've seen players do that successfully, mind you, but he didn't do that. He showed up and he showed up for the start of training camp and he played and practiced, and that was that. So, but again, my prediction, my gut at this point in time is we'll see him show up, maybe not the day one of training camp, but I don't think it'll be too late into the summer because of what you said. It is a new offense. He does have OBJ in the mix now, someone that he's friendly with. And while Beckham got no assurances from Lamar or the team, I still think it's one of those things that you look at it, and to me, it was kind of still a tell. If the
Dude, if you're
Ravens
going
had
to
plans,
play in September, the rest of this is just bullshit. You know what I mean? It's just performative at that point. It is. I mean, it's like getting Dennis and I talked about this. This whole Instagram picture with OBJ, it hurts your leverage. If I'm your agent, I would tell you not to do that. If you're
yeah,
serious about holding
yeah.
these guys up.
Well, and that's where I kind of look at it and say, okay, he did that. To me, if nothing else, when he posted that, the moment he posted that about 2 hours after the news broke that Beckham was signing with agreed to terms with the Ravens on $15 million for 1 year, that to me, at the very least, now that doesn't mean he's going to show up for the spring or mini camp or the first day of training camp, but that to me right there signaled that this trade request that he made, which I think most people thought this anyway, is not an ultimatum to say, Ravens, you're dead to me. I will never play for you again, no matter what, which I think we kind of knew, but this is just more confirmation that it's a negotiating ploy, which it often is. Keep in mind, Deebo Samuel, who ultimately signed with the 49ers an extension last offseason, he had a trade request. I mean, guys request trades all the time. Ray Lewis requested a trade at one point in time with the Ravens, and we saw how that turned out. He played his whole career in Baltimore. So it happens. It's not something that feels warm and fuzzy when it happens, but I think the Beckham, him posting that on Instagram, I still take that as a tell that Lamar's going to be here this year. Now, I think signing Beckham does not, I don't know if it even moves the needle in terms of a long-term deal getting done anytime soon. But I do think I think it was, I've seen some people say that it was an olive branch to Lamar. I don't know if I'd go that far. Do I think it's a little bit of an extra carrot to say, hey, look, we can't get this figured out. We know we feel the way we do. Lamar, you feel the way you do. But it's in our best interest for you to be here at least this year. It's in your best interest to have a really good season that you can, stick it up our you know what and have a great year and either prove to us or the 31 other teams that you're worth what you want by having a great season and us making a deep playoff run, all that. And Odell Beckham will help you do that. And we want to still win football games this year, even if we can't figure out the business side more than just the tag right now. So, I think from that standpoint, it is a little extra incentive. And maybe my reaction is to make it more specific, going back to, what I predict or what I see happening is Beckham being here now is a little extra incentive for Lamar to, even if he's not going to show up for day one of training camp, to not let this linger deep into August. And then, oh my goodness, you have a new offense. You have
Well,
some
is
new
your
guys
goal
at
to get a
wide
$200
receiver,
million
all that.
contract, or is your goal to win a Super Bowl? If your goal is to win a Super Bowl, they're trying to help you do that.
Sure. Well,
And they can look him in the eye and say they've been doing that from the beginning.
and by the way, those two things are related. I mean, Joe Flacco didn't get a $120 million contract because he was a great quarterback. He got that because he won a Super Bowl. I mean, he was a good quarterback who then played great in that postseason, and he got 120 as opposed to what the Ravens offered 90 that previous summer. So, you know, those are related. But your point is well taken, and that's why I've said I don't think it behooves him to hold out the entire summer or to hold out into the regular season, because then, yeah, you are talking about a diminishing return in terms of hindering your ability to go out and have a great season, knowing you have new offensive coordinator, some new pieces at wide receiver. Who knows what else they get in the draft. And the idea is to win, and then you can make even more money in the process of winning a Super Bowl or getting to a Super Bowl or even just getting to an AFC championship. Take the next step, let's say, as a team, as a quarterback at this point in your career, as far as January legacies go. So, that's what I think is going to happen. Now, I don't know how it's going to turn out. No one does at this point, but again, and I've been, you and I have talked about this a lot, especially earlier in the off season. You and I had pretty drastic changes or differences in opinion as far as what was going to happen with Lamar Jackson. But I just feel as the longer this goes on, I just don't see that team emerging. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some team has done a brilliant job of really hiding it. But, just looking at current cap space, looking at current situations, I don't know. I think all the variables at work, I think at this point in time, for there to be so little chatter, for there to be so little indication that there's even been a team seriously sniffing around, let alone trying to sign them to an offer sheet. I just don't know if that's changing. And you're right. The draft is kind of this next big, inflection point, let's say,
Well, what's
as
going to
far as,
happen next is like
yeah,
literally, right?
yeah,
It's the
but
next act in the play.
right. But if it comes and goes and we're still kind of in the same holding pattern, I guess that's the way we could describe it to some degree, then I mean, at some point in time, I think you just look at it and say, you know, one that also would, if the draft comes and goes and the Ravens don't draft a quarterback, for example, or they draft Stetson Bennett late, day 3 or something like that, certainly not a guy that you're drafting to start as a rookie, then you kind of look at it and say, well, the Ravens' best option, at least for this year, is Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson's best option for this year is to stay in Baltimore. And those two sides, to your point, maybe, that certainly would serve them better if they come to that conclusion sooner rather than later. But we know negotiating in any walk of life, not just the NFL, but lots of places, there is a lot of posturing that goes on. There's a lot of ego and there's a lot of,
Well,
a
Odell
lot of
Beckham was going to
rhetoric.
get 16 million from the Jets. Just ask him, right? Like
Well,
literally.
at the same time, when that report came out a few weeks back that he was seeking 15, most people laughed. I mean, I did a hit over the weekend with the NFL Network Radio for Sirius XM, and the first thing they asked me was my reaction to Odell Beckham. I said, even a week and a half ago, if you had told me that they were signing Odell Beckham, I'd say, wait, is it 2026? They're a few years too early to sign someone like Beckham, just based on how they operate. So, I guess you never really know. But again, I keep coming back to how this looks, and I don't see that. I don't see that team coming forward. I feel like it would have happened already, or there would at least be way more smoke to this point of that happening. Again, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times. I'll be wrong plenty of times in the future. But I just see this at this point for 2023 only. Again, who knows after that? I just feel that the Ravens and Lamar kind of, they need each other at least for one more year, and we'll kind of see how it goes after that. Doesn't mean it's going to be smooth or all that successful, even necessarily guaranteed. But I just kind of feel that that's where each side is at this point, and I don't think either side is better without the other for 2023 at the very least.
So get up on the draft, Luke. You start to think about what they need. And we were talking wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Now they give all this money to this guy who may be healthy, may play, but either way, if he plays really well, they won't be able to afford him next year, right? I mean, they're not going to give him they're not going to give him 3 more years and give him 60 million. Maybe they will if he catches 120 balls and they have big trust too. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of what they would call big trust with OBJ here. I'm sure he'll name it, but they just got so much that's so unlike what John Harbaugh has wanted. All of this attention on a malcontent quarterback, and they can't get a contract done, and now they're going to sign. Is there a louder player in the NFL? I mean, I literally, like, if we're talking who is the Dion, who is the T.O., maybe Aaron Rodgers because he's weird. But like, who gets more heat than Odell Beckham Jr. in this league when they tweet, he is at the center, other than maybe Lamar himself, he's at the center of the pop culture part of the NFL.
He's certainly up there. I mean, there are other players that fit that
Well,
category.
now that
Now,
Marshawn's gone, right? I mean, some of these guys are gone. Some of the Antonio Brown, some of these guys that
yeah,
brought light to themselves, that Chad Ochocinco, those kinds of personalities. I mean, even J.J. Watt's gone, right?
sure. I mean, I think the one thing that would be interesting, and again, I don't know where he ranks, and again, there are lots of players that are polarizing or lightning rods for attention, good or bad. I mean, there's plenty of that. But for him, how much attention he's gotten considering how little football he's played the last few years because of the injuries. I mean, think about this. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion probably 5 different times last season that the Dallas Cowboys were signing Odell Beckham, right? I mean, it just felt like that was going to happen, and it never did. And I mean, I think it really, it kind of was able to bear out that he wasn't ready, physically at that point to really be in a position to help a team. I think that was obvious. And, the Ravens and DaCosta and Harbaugh talked about this in the press conference. They had dialogue with Beckham the second half of last year. I don't think it ever got to a serious point where they were talking contract. I think it was more, hey, how are you feeling?
Never felt like they would sign a guy like him. It just felt
No.
like they just wouldn't be interested in him for price, for this, for that, just for all of it. I mean,
Well,
whether the
I'm,
juice would be worth the squeeze or not, because you're not getting the 25-year-old version of him. You're not.
I mean, for me, it's not even so much about the personality, because let's face it. I mean, this team signed Steve Smith when he was at a point where it looked like he was very much on the downside of his career. And let's face it, Steve Smith's a loud personality. And that worked out beautifully here in terms of how he fit and how he got along with everyone. Now, you would have liked him not to tear his Achilles a second year. And certainly from that point on, he wasn't the same guy that he was that first year. But my point is, I don't even think it's so much the personality part of it nearly as much as what you just said. I mean, it's more so the financial commitment. Again, you have to go back to not when they released Anquan Bolden after the Super Bowl, but when they acquired him from Arizona in 2010 and gave him a 3-year, 25, $26 million extension. What that financial commitment was relative to the cap. That was on the higher end. When they signed
Oh,
Derek
and Ray
Mason.
was making a lot of money, and Suggs was top of line, and like they were paying a lot of players at that moment. At that moment,
Well, I mean, it helped. They had a rookie quarterback or a rookie quarterback contract with
yeah, they
Flacco.
weren't
So
paying Joe, right?
right, exactly. So, but you had that, and I'd go back to when they signed Derek Mason in 2005, the money they gave him at that point in time. Again, this contract dwarfs those in terms of annual value, but relative to the cap, I mean, they haven't been in this territory. So that's where it was just so surprising.
Well, part
One,
of
that
it
they
is how could they have a wide receiver that's actually worth 15 million? How could they get a guy the ball enough, even if he's good enough, to get a guy the ball 80 to 110 times a year to have that cash out? Even 65 or 70 times a year, third and back shoulder to win Super Bowls, whatever it would be. But you do say, like, are they going to throw the ball? And I would have said this to you for 5 years. When
Mhm.
Willie Snead's in here and they're drafting Hollywood, who wants out, they're drafting all these guys who want the ball, want the ball. Does this really mean that they're going to throw the ball 42 times a game and target him 10, 12, 14 times a game? Like, we haven't seen that here with Lamar Jackson. Let's just say that.
Well, but we have to fully acknowledge it's not the same offense coordinator. I mean, now. Do I think they're going from run heavy to pass heavy, and they're going from one extreme to the other? No. Do I think they're going to throw the ball more than they have? Well, they kind of have the last couple years compared to where they were with Lamar rookie year 2, year 3. So that's kind of happened anyway. It's just when they did that, and we can talk about Greg Roman, who's never coordinated a terribly efficient passing game for more than a year, kind of a year. He did it in 2019 with how efficient they were, but never a high volume passing game. So you have that. Then you say, okay, well, if we are going to throw the ball more, then yeah, we do need better wide receivers. So I think that's part of it. Now, to answer your question, no, I don't think they're going to throw it 42 times a game. Do I think they're going to throw it more than they have? A little bit, yeah. But I think the big key, and I've said this over and over and over, is getting back to the efficiency that they had throwing the ball 4 years ago with Lamar, which allowed him to lead the league in touchdown passes. I mean, you don't do that by accident if you aren't incredibly efficient. So I think it's more so about trying to take the elements of what they did then and then blending it in with things that Todd Monken has done. And go look at Georgia's offense the last couple of years. I mean, they ran the ball really well. They threw to the tight ends a lot, but it was much more balanced. And I think that that's what they're looking for, is to become a little more multiple, and certainly improving at wide receiver was a must to be able to do that. Now, I don't know how it's going to work out entirely, but I think they had seen enough from the Greg Roman offense in saying, we're not moving forward. At best, we're staying the same, but really we're backsliding. And that's where they found
Well,
themselves.
Lamar
the
wasn't
last
getting
couple
better.
years. Sure. I mean, although he started out really, really good, and then Bateman got hurt last year, and we saw what happened to the passing game after that. So, you can't just have one wide receiver that you're counting on. You need to have a couple guys. And look, I don't think, first of all, this is where let's bring some context. We're saying $15 million. That's tied for 21st in terms of AAV for wide receivers in 2023.
So we're expecting him to catch 60 balls, not 800.
I mean, not 100, certainly not 100. I don't expect that. I think if we're going to be realistic and fully understanding that Odell Beckham has not had a 1,300-yard elite, oh my gosh, this guy's a top 5 wide receiver season since 2016. I mean, his first 3 years with the Giants, he looked like he was going to be the next Randy Moss in terms of like, this guy's going to put up monster numbers and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Since then, he's had the health concerns. And certainly with Cleveland, it was, partly health, partly being a Cleveland Brown, quite frankly. And we kind of saw, all the clashing of him and Baker Mayfield. I will actually say, in defense of Beckham, and I'm not saying that he's blameless, I think that situation aged a little more favorably for him than we thought maybe at the time. I think there was a perception at the time that, Beckham was the big problem. And, well, we kind of see what's happened to Baker Mayfield over the last 2-3 years. So my point is, he doesn't have to come in. First of all, he's not going to come in and have 1,300 receiving yards. I just don't see that. I'd be shocked. We're talking about someone who's so far removed from being that guy. However, if he is healthy, and that's a big if, that's a big assumption, but clearly the Ravens feel very good about his health and where he is physically, or they wouldn't have given him $15 million, because if they didn't, then shame on them, because then that's the difference between taking a big swing and just being reckless.
Yeah, the question isn't whether he can be effective. Health should not be, it's like coaching effort. We're getting that, right? Like, he is healthy if you're giving him $15 million. That shouldn't be of any question. Now it's whether he can be productive or not.
And that's the big thing. So if you're asking me within the realm of reasonable, realistic expectations, let's say, can Odell Beckham be, a receiver around 1,000 yards, maybe 900 yards, and catch 8 touchdowns for you? I think that's possible if he's healthy and truly over that ACL, which, keep in mind, the first ACL, and he talked about this. This is, he talked about this last spring, but he talked about Neil Elitrash, the renowned sports doctor, that he's the team doctor for the Rams. When he joined the Rams, they took an MRI. They saw that his ACL surgery didn't take. When he tore his ACL with the Browns, it didn't take. So, he's and again, this is according to him, and he cited Elitrash, who is, he's a renowned doctor. This isn't some quack saying this, but he didn't have an ACL. Now, can you play without an ACL? You can. It's rare. I think back to the NBA player, DeJuan Blair, who played at Pitt and played in the NBA for 5 minutes. He had didn't have an ACL in either knee because of I think going back to high school injuries. But the point is, he did that, got hurt in the Super Bowl, finally got the ACL fixed, didn't play last year. So by the time week 1 comes around, he's going to be 19 months removed from that Super Bowl against playing for the Rams against the Bengals. If he's healthy, if he's right, if he's fully recovered from that, I think he could be a guy that could be in the neighborhood of 900, 950, maybe 1,000 receiving yards. And if, and again, I'm using the word if, I mean, there are unknowns about this. There are. This is a big risk. But if Rashad Bateman can stay on the field, I see a scenario where they could kind of be 1 and 1A, and that doesn't mean that they're Chase and T. Higgins for the Bengals. Doesn't mean that they're one of the best duos in the NFL, but a rock solid, good duo where you have 2 guys that are kind of maybe not each at 1,000 yards, but, up 800 plus, 850 plus, something like that. You have that, then also with Mark Andrews, let's not forget about him. He's kind of the forgotten guy. When I hear people say that Lamar hasn't had weapons, he's had one of the three best tight ends in the NFL over the last 2 or 3 years. So let's not forget about that. But if you have that trio of pass catchers, then we are talking about a much better passing offense and a much better version of Lamar Jackson, coupled with, oh yeah, you still have Lamar's rushing ability, and you have J.K. Dobbins, who's another year removed from the ACL, and Gus Edwards, who's another year removed from his ACL. Then you start to look at this offense with an offensive line that, other than Ben Powers, is intact from a year ago. What I just laid out there is a formula for this offense being pretty darn good then. So
better get your quarterback in camp. I like everything you're selling me. I really do. But you better get the quarterback in and ready to play.
Fair enough. But I still come back to, is Lamar Jackson going to hold out? Is he going to sit out the season? I don't think he's going to. I just don't. I just don't see how that's going to benefit him when there is so much information. And look, fans and media, I think what has become evident this offseason to me, and I'm not talking out of, this isn't a completely original thought. I've seen lots of people utter this notion. I think it is evident at this point in time, and there was plenty of evidence going all the way back to the draft when Lamar was coming out of college, that NFL talent evaluators collectively do not look at Lamar Jackson as favorably as a large, overwhelming, I don't want to say overwhelming, but a large portion of media and a large portion of fans. Is that right? I think Lamar Jackson's a hell of a quarterback, but I think there are a lot of teams in the NFL right now who have kind of signaled to you, a lot of teams who don't have quarterbacks. Let's face it. You mentioned the Atlanta Falcons earlier in our conversation. They really gonna roll with Desmond Ridder? All the work.
The Commanders have an owner now, allegedly, but no quarterback, right?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have mentioned this in passing. If you want to throw out the wild card in all this, if you want to throw out the scenario that is impossible to predict until Joshua Harris and his group is officially the owner of the Washington Commanders, that's the one that you could throw out and say, yeah, he's not part of the club. He hasn't been around as much. Could he go out and throw Lamar Jackson the contract that he wants and kind of upset the power struggle so much so to speak, in the NFL? Maybe. But if that doesn't happen, I still think it comes back to everything I just said about the Ravens having a good roster, a roster that's ready, made the playoffs last year, even with Lamar being hurt. So, he comes back healthy, motivated to have a great season because he wants to prove the Ravens and everyone else wrong and that he is deserving of the kind of contract that he wants. Then, I think that scenario is there. But I think if he holds out, I'm not sure what that's really proving for him. And, oh yeah, even at 32.4, Nestor, that's doubling his career earnings. It's below what he deserves to make from a market standpoint. 32.4 is below market for a really good quarterback like Lamar is. But is he going to walk away from that much money and potentially sit out halfway through the season or anything like that? I don't know. Lamar is his own. I think if there's nothing else we've learned at this point, that he does things his way, whether you agree with it or not, whether you think it's wise or not. So I don't want to just make an assumption, but I keep coming back to that and saying, he's got a lot on the line to go out and have a great season and, go have a great season, lead the Ravens to a deep playoff run, and either the Ravens or someone else will certainly be more likely to want to give you what you want then than they appear to be right now. And, he's got an opportunity, I think a potentially really good opportunity to do that in Baltimore this year, albeit on the franchise tag, which certainly I can't certainly could understand him not being thrilled about playing on it. But I just feel like that's his reality right now, whether it's right or wrong. I think that's what it is.
Luke Jones is my dude. He will be here all week getting you ready for the NFL draft, as well as Orioles, Nationals, the rivalry baseball, whatever they call that. I'm not sure exactly. Everybody's Orioles rival right now is they bring it every night with the bats. trying to figure out the arms. Meanwhile, Luke's trying to figure out. We figured the wide receiver position out. Now we got to figure the rest of the draft out and what Eric DeCosta and Joe Ortiz have up their sleeves for next Thursday and Friday and Saturday. Hollywood Casino is a great place to watch the draft. I want to remind everybody of our partnership with them. That's going on next Thursday and Friday. We're going to be at Captain Larry's in the afternoon on Thursday of the draft day, next Thursday. Then on Friday in the morning at Fadley's at the Old Lexington Market. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We're going to be playing 50th anniversary. Love giving money away. People love these scratch-offs, man. Lining them up there at Pappas last week. Our friends at Window Nation also lining them up. 866-90-NATION. You buy two, you get two free. 5 years, 60 months, 0% financing. And my friend Leonard Raskin with the gavel of truth. Luke, truth is, it's going to be a good week for baseball around here. Spring is sprung. We got good weather happening. And you and I will be in touch on social media. You can find Luke at Baltimore Luke. You can find me, Ness, at BaltimorePositive.com. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Lamar Jackson and Orioles baseball and spring fever. We are BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.